I wish I'd thought of this earlier. I'm going to take this question because I'm not going to get it again, and I'm sorry to go back to the Star Trek thing, but this one at least this one is not inside baseball. Okay, this isn't just the frame of Star Trek. This is a question that is a great question regardless of whether you're a big Star Trek fan. Matthew Lloyd asks, is the Star Trek transporter actually a murder machine? Is the person on the other end really you, or is it just an exact copy of you? If the transporter is just a copier, that would likely give it the highest body count of any sci-fi device. Now, this is a fascinating question that nobody thinks through. Gene Roddenberry didn't think it through. I'm sure writers have thought it through, but when you think it through, you realize, my God, we can't ever tell anybody about this because it will ruin the entire thing about a transporter. Just for giggles, the idea of the transporter, which they're actually beaming particles from one place to another, and quantum particle goes from one place to the other without going between the two. So basically what the transporter is, you step onto this panel, step onto this, paper plate basically, and a very intense beam of energy comes down and dissolves your molecules. It just turns you into dust, basically, just dissolves you into gas. But as it's breaking you down, it's studying your composition to such a degree that not only is your brain reproduced, but your actual thoughts are being reproduced. This thing is so sensitive and so high information that it's able to record your brain as a series of molecules in such a way so that the memories are still intact and everything. And the theory is that, yes, it's exactly right. When you transport from here to Alpha Centauri, you walk into a booth here and you're disintegrated and you arrive in Alpha Centauri. Now, you don't see the difference, obviously, because your consciousness just goes, assuming this thing works, right? I step into a booth, and I wake up. I don't wake up, and I step out of another booth, and I'm 4 light years away. Time hasn't passed, and, whatever. But did I actually make the trip? Now we get to the reason why I wanted to take this question. Did I make the trip? Depends on what me is. It depends on what your definition of is. But in this case, it depends on what your definition of Bill is. Because the answer to the question of did I make the trip to Alpha Centauri is yes and no. And it's not like in between, like yes or no. It's yes and no. It's a definitive yes, I did make the journey, and it's a definitive no, I did not make the journey. What does that mean? Well, it means that when the transporter broke me down here on Earth into my independent molecules, it had to destroy me in order to record them. You see, that's what it does. It destroys the creature, because when the things, yeah, you see it appear somewhere else, but if you just stayed on the Enterprise, if you never left and never beamed down, it would be a disintegration booth. You just see people walk into this thing, disappear into light and dust, and then they're just being murdered. He's exactly right. It's a murder machine. People go in there and they're disintegrated. It's like those disintegration machines in that episode about the 2 planets that were at war with computers. So my material objects did not make the trip. Some people say that my atoms are being beamed along with it, maybe, but certainly my body walked into a booth in one place, and that's where it stayed. It did not come out on the booth on the other end. On the other end was assembled out of new raw materials, or my matter was transported the same way with the energy, which sounds like a waste of time for me, and it's built again, but it's not me. So I did not make the trip. And at the same time, I did make the trip because my consciousness is there. And that's what counts. So the question that is, the philosophical question is interesting, and then the storytelling question is fatal. The philosophical question is, what am I? And nobody really gives this a great deal of thought. Well, most people don't anyway. You can pinch yourself, it's like, this is me, this is me, this is my physical body. True. But the cells are regenerating once every, 7 years or something like that? That's probably a canard. But certainly your skin, when you have a scar, or forget a scar, you have a cut, scratch or a scrape or something, right? And you've got a mark on your hand where you scraped your skin off. And then it forms a scab. And then over time the scab falls off, and then the wound heals and it just disappears. Well, the wound heals. What does that mean? What it really means is the skin underneath it has grown out, and the damage has essentially fallen off with the rest of the stuff that falls off of you. So when you say this is me, no, it's not necessarily me. This is not the same. These are not the same molecules I was born with. Some of them are the same, but a lot of them are skin that I shed. We just shedding skin all the time, hair all the time. You know, all kinds of different things are constantly being renewed and recycled. So basically, Bill Whittle is not this collection of matter. Bill Whittle is the organization of the matter. He's the structure of the matter. He's not just the phosphates and the carbon and the iron and all the rest. He is that. He's the carbon and the phosphorus and the calcium and all the rest of it. He is that, but he's also, and most importantly, he is those things structured in such a way as to make him a unique individual. And every single person that's ever been born, ever will be born on this or any other planet is completely unique individual. That's mind-boggling when you think about it. So the pattern is what goes. And that's what's interesting, because in some level we're being transported in the real world every day. We are, the cells that we were born with, or the cells that we had 10 years ago, are not the cells that we have today. And the cells that we'll have 10 years from now are not the cells that we have now. They'll be in the same arrangement, and they'll be as they constantly reproduce themselves, they get a little bad at it. It's not a digital reproduction. It's like taking a photocopy of something, then photocopying the photocopy, then photocopying the photocopy of it starts to drift. Telomeres get a little short, and the information is not so reliably passed down, and that's why we get things like, saggy bags under our eyes and all the rest of it. It's a copying error. But I'm the structure. I'm the plan. Richard Dawson, who is a person I don't have a lot of respect for a number of reasons. However, his work on biology and on genetics is superb and is really brilliant work. And he makes the interesting and compelling case that you are not really you. The real you is your DNA. That's what's eternal. The real you is the DNA that's passed down from generation to generation, combines with other DNA. But basically, you are just a living, walking robot that the DNA is using to continue its immortality by reproducing out in the world. It's a clever idea. But it's really true. It's a structure. And then you get into interesting things like when you start getting into the actual cosmology of quantum, you find out that the universe isn't made of matter. That's not what the structure is. The structure of the universe may not be the relationship of matter. The structure of the universe may be information. This is getting to be compelling evidence that the more information there is available, the more complex the universe becomes, because we're observers and our observing changes the outcome. Once I realized that was experimentally true, then my entire theory of materialism went right out the window. Once I realized that by looking at something, you physically change it. Did I say, I don't know who I said, Dawkins I meant. Thank you, Ohio Costigan. So, the pattern's what counts, right? So did I go to Alpha Centauri? I did and I did not. My body didn't. My molecules probably didn't. If they reassembled me on the other end out of big vats of carbon and stuff, they put me back together the way I was the instant I stepped into that booth back there, then on some very real level I went. But here's where the storytelling gets interesting, and this is also where the storytelling falls apart. Because in order to have a transporter, you have to have a machine that is capable of the kind of finesse to know the location of essentially every molecule in my body and the electrical state between all of them. Otherwise, it's not me. Now, technology is technology, and we have miracles today that no one could have imagined 100 years ago, so let's say that we can do that. Let's say that we can have a recording system that is so sophisticated that by essentially disintegrating me, turning me into plasma with energy, and recording every single molecule's precise location and orientation, then you can transport yourself to another condition. However, you didn't really go. The you that was on Earth walked into a disintegration booth and was destroyed. And the vat of chemicals that's in Alpha Centauri suddenly assembles itself into something that looks like you and thinks like you, has your pattern, but it's not you. It's your consciousness even, but it's not you. You died in that booth back there. I think that's why McCoy never wanted to ride in the thing. But here's the reason why the storytelling, I keep teasing that the transporter could never, people think it through, they could never have a transporter. And the reason is this. If you have a device that is capable of breaking down somebody's molecules and recording them to the kind of fidelity so that you can recreate that person down on the planet. They walk into one room, we record the information, send the information down, and reassemble the person either using their molecules or using existing molecules, whatever. Reassemble it on the spot. Then if you have the information to build a Jim Kirk, because Jim Kirk went into the transporter in orbit and then Jim Kirk appeared on the surface of the planet, if you've got a machine that's capable of recording every molecule of Jim Kirk and saving it in order to send it down, then you realize that nobody ever dies once you've been transported. Then you realize that you could beam Captain Kirk down to the planet's surface. He'd walk into the transporter at the beginning of the show. The transporter beam would break down his atoms and record everything. They'd beam him right down into the mouth of that giant white ape with a horn on its head, which kills him instantly, guts him, smashes him, eats him, does all of that stuff. Oh my God, Kirk is dead. Kirk is dead. He's gone. The captain's dead. He's not dead. We have a print of him from the last time he transported. We'll just print another one. See, now it gets interesting. If you have a transporter, once you transport yourself, you don't really die. It's like a set point in a game. If you've ever played first-person shooter games, you can, if you're playing a game that you have to progress through, and it's a dangerous game where your character gets killed, and if you don't get killed, and it's not fun because it's not challenging, you can't go back to the beginning every single time. You have to set point, like you go back to the beginning of the level, but you don't go back to the beginning of the game. So if Kirk beams down on a Tuesday and Kirk is killed on a Thursday, then they can recreate a new Kirk on Thursday night, which will have all of the memories of Kirk up until the point when he disappeared. The things that happened on Wednesday are gone. That died. But everything that he was up until the moment he stepped into that booth is back, and he can just beam right down again. So that's one thing. You cannot be killed if you have a transporter. There's a set point. It's like a save point on a computer. We're going to save our work here. Everybody's had this experience, right? You're writing something complex, or you're doing Photoshop or whatever, and you save the file, and you continue to do some work, and then the computer crashes, and you've lost all of the work that you've done since the save point, and that's why it's good to save often. Same exact thing with the transporter. You've got a Jim Kirk that is as old as he is the last time he went into that transporter, and if something happens to him, including him being blown to insta atoms, he beams into a volcano. Okay, we'll make another James Kirk using the pattern that we used to get him just a minute ago, and we will make another one, so nobody ever dies. And the other thing that nobody talks about is, if you have that information, not only does Jim Kirk never die because you can just make another one, you could make as many Jim Kirks as you wanted to. You could have 500,000 Jim Kirks. Instead of beaming down 7 different people, what you're really beaming down in the story is 7 different patterns, right? 7 different patterns that make up 7 different individuals. You got Spock, you got McCoy, you got Kirk, and you got 4 guys that are going to wear red shirts and be killed to show you how the monster works. But you don't have to send those 7 individuals down. You can just have Kirk go down, and you can have 7 of Kirks reassembled there. So now you got 7 Captain Kirks on the planet, and they're all out there doing their thing. So, and interesting question here. Dave Donardo says, what if you print 100 Kirks? Which one is the actual Kirk? This is the essence of the philosophical discussion, because my response would be all of them are the actual Kirk. But technically speaking, the only actual Kirk was the Kirk that first walked into the transporter the first time. That individual body, when he transports for the first time, let's say he's 35 years old as the captain of the Enterprise, and let's say he transports first time when he's 20. That first transporter experience is him taking his body to be disintegrated, and everything after that is stuff that could have been copied or reset or replayed or stored or whatever. I think it was Next Generation did a show where Scotty was in a ship that was dying, and he knew he was never going to be rescued. There wasn't enough energy for life support. He was going to be out there forever. So he basically transported himself and kept himself in memory, and the ship just had enough energy just to keep just the memory of Scotty's platform. So 50 years or 100 years later, they gas it up and they bring it back. I thought that was brilliant. It was one of the very few times we've been talking about really understanding what the transporter is. And the replicator works the same way. If you can replicate food, then you can replicate people, because food is animals. You say, I want my roast beef rare or my Earl Grey tea hot, or whatever you want to call it. If you can reproduce that, then You can reproduce people too. You can reproduce anything. And these are called Santa Claus machines or von Neumann machines. It's a machine that can make any other kind of machine. A von Neumann machine is a machine that can create anything, and the first thing that it creates is itself. So if you've got a machine that can build anything, the first thing that machine should build is another one of it. And then that should build, then two of them should build copies of it. And they reproduce literally virally. That's what viral reproduction is. Now you've got millions of machines that can produce anything, and then you can simply just build your civilization by just sending it orders. So that's an interesting question.